She was sitting alone at a wedding, invisible to everyone, until a stranger leaned close and whispered, "Pretend you're with me." From that moment, her world changed forever. This is a heart-melting love story between Samantha Hallie, a quiet girl who thought she'd never be chosen, and Felix Kingston, a billionaire who discovered that true love cannot be bought. Stay with us till the end, because their journey will leave your heart full and teach a lesson society needs to remember. The wedding hall glowed with golden chandeliers, their warm light reflecting off crystal glasses and polished silver. The air was alive with music, laughter, and the rustle of expensive gowns brushing against marble floors. It was the kind of evening most guests would treasure, a night of love, joy, and endless celebration. But not for Samantha Hallie. She sat at the very edge of the hall, almost hidden behind a row of tall flower stands overflowing with roses and lilies. The flowers were meant to beautify the room, but for her they acted like a shield, keeping her out of sight, tucked away in a corner where no one would notice her solitude. Her dress was soft blue satin, simple yet graceful. The fabric shimmered when light touched it, but she felt invisible inside it. Around her, couples laughed, whispered secrets, clinked their champagne glasses, and leaned closer as if the world existed only for them. Samantha's fingers twisted the little clutch in her lap again and again, the motion nervous, restless, almost desperate. She crossed her legs, uncrossed them, then glanced at the door as if someone, anyone, might appear and rescue her from her loneliness. But no one came. She was not family. She was not a close friend. She was only here because of a distant work connection, invited out of formality. That truth stung with every second that passed. Her eyes darted across the room. Tables were filled with groups, the kind where conversations overflowed with inside jokes and shared memories. Laughter burst like bubbles, filling the air. Every sound reminded her of her own silence. She whispered under her breath, too soft for anyone to hear, "Just smile, Sam. Just get through tonight." But the smile never came. Instead, her chest tightened with a strange heaviness. She shifted in her seat, trying to appear calm, but her thoughts betrayed her. Everyone is looking at me. They all see I'm alone. They're probably wondering why I'm even here. The music grew louder, and the bride twirled across the floor, her veil catching the light like a cloud of silver. Guests clapped, cheering loudly, but Samantha's hands remained still in her lap. She forced herself to clap softly a moment later, but even her applause sounded hollow, empty. Her heart ached. She was 25, young enough to dream of love, but old enough to know how cruel loneliness could feel in moments like this. She thought of the times she imagined walking into an event with someone by her side, someone whose hand she could hold, someone who would look at her like she was the only person in the room. But reality mocked her. She had no one. A waiter approached, setting down a glass of champagne in front of her with a polite nod. She murmured a thank you, her voice barely above a whisper. She lifted the glass but didn't drink, only staring at the bubbles rising inside. Somehow it mirrored her, fragile, fleeting, about to disappear. A couple at the nearest table laughed again, the man leaning to kiss the woman's cheek. Samantha turned away quickly, her throat tightening. She pressed her palm against her chest, as if trying to calm the storm inside. Why did I even come? She thought. I could have stayed home. No one would have noticed. No one here even cares if I'm here. She straightened in her chair, smoothing her dress over her knees, trying to regain composure. She wanted to appear strong, unaffected. But strength was difficult when she felt like the only shadow in a room of shining lights. Her mind replayed moments from earlier, the awkward hello she gave at the entrance, the way no one lingered in conversation with her, the polite but quick smiles people offered before turning away. It was as if her presence had no weight, as if she were nothing more than an afterthought. She inhaled deeply, forcing air into her lungs. She told herself she could leave soon. maybe slip out before the dancing began, before the music grew slower and couples drifted together in intimate embraces. She could escape the sight of love she didn't have, the reminder of everything missing in her life. Yet, even as she planned her exit, something inside whispered, "Stay, just for a little while longer. Maybe tonight doesn't end the way you think." Her eyes flickered toward the grand doors of the hall, almost without realizing it. Guests were still arriving, their voices mingling as they stepped inside. She scanned their faces absent-mindedly, expecting nothing but more strangers. But then, for a brief second, her heart skipped. Her gaze caught sight of someone, a tall man, stepping into the hall with a confidence that seemed to command the air around him. He was different from the others. His stride was purposeful, not hurried. His expression was calm, not overly cheerful like the rest. Samantha blinked, shaking her head slightly. She told herself it didn't matter. He didn't matter. Just another guest among dozens. And yet, something about that moment made her pulse quicken. She pressed her clutch tighter, whispering again, "Just smile, Sam. Just get through tonight." But deep inside, she had no idea that her night was about to change forever. The grand doors of the wedding hall opened again, and a hush rippled through the crowd, almost like the air itself recognized the arrival of someone extraordinary. Felix Kingston stepped inside. At 35, he carried himself with the kind of confidence that didn't need to be announced. His tall frame filled the doorway, his tailored black suit hugging him perfectly, crisp and commanding. Even without a word, people turned to notice him, the way they always did. Whispers spread quickly. Guests nudged each other, smiling, curious, admiring. He was the man everyone wanted to speak to, the billionaire whose name was carved into skyscrapers across the city. To many, he was a symbol of success, power, and wealth. But Felix was tired of it. Behind his calm exterior, his sharp gray eyes scanned the room. He wasn't here for deals, connections, or shallow conversations that always circled back to money. No. Tonight he was searching for something else, something he couldn't name, something real. His gaze swept past the polished tables, the glittering gowns, the guests who tried to catch his eye. None of them held his attention, until he saw her. A young woman sitting near the edge of the hall, half hidden behind flowers. Alone, silent. Her eyes cast downward as if she wished she could disappear. For the first time in years, something inside Felix stirred. Her loneliness struck him like a chord, familiar, haunting, irresistible. He, the man surrounded by people wherever he went, recognized the quiet emptiness she carried. And strangely, it tugged at him in a way no riches ever could. Felix Kingston, the man who had everything, felt his chest tighten with curiosity, with need. Who was she? Why did she sit alone as though she didn't belong? He didn't think twice. Ignoring the curious glances and hopeful smiles of others, he moved through the hall with steady, purposeful steps. Each stride brought him closer to her, cutting through the crowd like he belonged to another world. Samantha didn't see him at first. Her head was lowered, her thoughts tangled in silence. But as his shadow fell across her table, she looked up, and their eyes met. In that instant, Felix knew. This night was no longer about the wedding. It was about her. Without hesitation, without a single doubt, he walked straight toward her table, and Samantha Hallie's lonely evening was about to turn into the most unforgettable moment of her life. Samantha's gaze lifted when the tall man's shadow fell across her table. She blinked, startled, her lips parting slightly in surprise. He stood there, calm yet commanding, like he belonged in every room he entered. His tailored suit looked effortless on him, but it was not his clothes that caught her attention. It was the quiet authority in his stance, the kind of presence that made people turn without knowing why. Her heart gave a sudden, nervous thump. She wasn't used to men like him stopping at her table. In fact, no one ever stopped at her table. And then he leaned down, so close that she could feel the warmth of his breath brushing against her ear, sending shivers down her neck. His voice was low, quiet, yet steady. "Pretend you're with me," he whispered. Her heart stopped. For a moment she wondered if she had misheard him. Her mind spun, trying to catch up with the words that had just shaken her entire night. "Pretend you're with me?" She swallowed, unable to form a reply. Before she could question him, before she could even process, he moved with calm assurance, pulling out the chair beside her. The scrape of the chair legs against the marble floor felt louder than the music, at least to her. Her pulse raced as he sat down, as though it was the most natural thing in the world, as if he had always belonged there, by her side. And then his hand, large, steady, protective. It slid over hers, resting on the table. His touch wasn't forceful, it wasn't rushed. It was quiet, intentional, a silent shield against the weight of her loneliness. Samantha's breath caught. Her cheeks burned. The entire room felt suddenly brighter, yet quieter, as though the noise had faded the moment he touched her. Her first instinct was to pull away, but she didn't. Something in his touch told her not to. Something in his presence whispered safety. Across the room, people had noticed. Curious glances flickered their way. A few whispers drifted, hushed yet obvious. But those whispers died the moment their eyes recognized him. Felix Kingston, the billionaire, the man everyone admired but dared not approach too boldly. And now he sat beside her, his hand resting gently over hers, his expression calm and unbothered by the weight of 100 silent stares. Samantha's mind raced. She wasn't invisible anymore. No longer the girl alone at the edge of the hall. No longer the shadow hiding behind flowers. Now she was someone. Not just someone. She was the woman sitting beside Felix Kingston. Her chest tightened with disbelief. A mix of fear, wonder, and warmth tangled inside her. She didn't know whether to pull her hand back, to question him, or to let herself sink into this impossible moment. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Why?" Felix tilted his head slightly toward her, his eyes softening, his voice low again. "Because no one should sit through a night like this alone." The words hit her harder than she expected. They weren't grand, they weren't rehearsed, they were real. And for Samantha, real was more valuable than diamonds. She stared at him, her heart aching with a strange new feeling she couldn't name. Around them, the crowd carried on, music playing, glasses clinking, but for Samantha, the room blurred. Her world had narrowed down to the man beside her. His warmth, his voice, his hand over hers, her cheeks flushed deeper. She lowered her gaze, trying to hide the emotion in her eyes, but her chest lifted with a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding all night. Safe. That was the word. For the first time that evening, she didn't feel awkward or invisible or out of place. She felt safe. And as she let her hand remain beneath his, she realized something quietly terrifying. This stranger's whisper had just changed everything. The music shifted, softening into a slow, romantic melody that drifted across the wedding hall. The lights seemed to dim slightly, casting a golden glow over the polished floor. Couples began to rise, hands reaching for one another as they moved gracefully toward the center. Felix rose too, his chair sliding back quietly. He extended his hand toward Samantha, his movement steady and deliberate. "Dance with me," he said. His voice wasn't demanding. It was deeper, stronger, more like a vow than a request. Samantha's breath hitched. Her eyes widened, her fingers clenching her clutch tighter. I don't even know you," she whispered, her voice trembling like a fragile thread. His eyes softened, warm yet intense, holding hers with quiet certainty. "You will," he replied gently. For a moment, her heart battled between fear and longing. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand. His fingers curled around hers, firm but careful, guiding her from the safety of her chair. The crowd seemed to part naturally, as though the dance floor had been waiting just for them. The moment his arms circled her waist, Samantha felt the air rush from her lungs. The world around her blurred, the clinking glasses, the murmurs, the whispers, all fading into the distance. There was only him. Her pulse thundered in her ears as he led her into the rhythm. Every step was steady, controlled, as if Felix had been born to guide her. And yet, It didn't feel rehearsed. It felt intimate. She leaned closer without meaning to, her cheek brushing the edge of his chest. His heartbeat was steady, strong, grounding her even as her own raced wildly. Her thoughts tangled. Was she more afraid of stumbling across the floor in front of everyone, or of the way her heart was already surrendering to this stranger? Felix bent lower, his lips near her ear once again. His voice was velvet, brushing against her skin. "You don't know how long I've been waiting," he murmured. Samantha's breath caught. She glanced up at him, her eyes wide. "Waiting for what?" "For someone who doesn't want me for my money," he said softly. "For someone real. Tonight, when I saw you sitting alone, I knew. You're different." Her chest tightened, her eyes stinging as warmth spread through her. No one had ever said words like that to her. No one had ever seen her. She whispered back, her voice breaking with quiet emotion. "And I thought I'd stay invisible forever, until you saw me." Their steps slowed, their bodies closer now. And in the center of a crowded wedding hall, they moved as if the dance belonged only to them. Two souls sharing a secret the world could never take away. The wedding slowly came to an end. Laughter faded into quiet goodbyes, music drifted into silence, and guests began to leave with smiling faces and tired steps. But Felix didn't let Samantha slip back into the shadows. He stayed close, his hand lightly resting at the small of her back as if it belonged there, guiding her gently toward the garden outside. The night was calm. Strings of glowing lights wrapped around tall garden trees, casting a soft, magical glow on the path ahead. The scent of roses lingered in the cool air, mixing with the faint sound of water trickling from a nearby fountain. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. Their silence was not awkward. It was strangely comforting, a language of its own. Samantha walked beside him, her heart still racing from the dance. Every step felt surreal, as though she had stepped into someone else's life, a life where a powerful man chose her, not because of wealth or beauty, but because he simply wanted her there. A breeze swept through the garden, brushing against her skin. She shivered slightly, pulling her arms close. Without hesitation, Felix removed his jacket. He stepped behind her, draping it gently over her shoulders. The fabric was warm, carrying his scent, clean, subtle, intoxicating. His hand lingered for a moment on her shoulder, firm yet protective. That single touch sent a current through her veins, steadying her heart and making it race all at once. She turned, her eyes meeting his beneath the golden lights. For a moment, neither of them looked away. Something powerful was growing between them, undeniable, unstoppable. But then the doubts crept in. Samantha's lips parted, her voice breaking with insecurity. "Felix, you're a billionaire. You could be with anyone. Women who are more beautiful, more confident, more everything. Why me?" Her question hung heavy in the night air, trembling with fear of rejection. Felix stepped closer, his gaze never leaving hers. His voice was steady but filled with emotion, raw and unguarded. "Because money never kept me warm at night," he said softly. "Power never made me feel alive. You did, all in one evening." Her breath hitched, her throat tightening as tears welled in her eyes. He leaned even closer, his tone quieter now but stronger than ever. "Samantha, you remind me what it means to be human." The words struck her heart like a flame in the darkness. Her eyes glistened, tears slipping free, tears not of pain but of being seen, truly seen, for the first time in years. And in that garden, beneath the glow of 1,000 tiny lights, Samantha Hallie finally let herself believe the impossible. That she was worthy of being chosen. Weeks had passed since the night Samantha's world had shifted forever. She was no longer the forgotten girl at the corner table, no longer the invisible woman who felt too small to be noticed. Now, she walked beside Felix Kingston, the man who had the world at his feet but found his heart in her hands. Their steps were not always easy. Everywhere they went, eyes followed. Whispers rose like shadows in the background. Some smiled, touched by the unexpected beauty of their bond. Others frowned, unable to understand why a billionaire would hold the hand of a woman who owned nothing but her kindness and her courage. At charity galas, women in diamond necklaces leaned in close and whispered behind their glasses of champagne. "She doesn't belong here." At business dinners, men raised their brows, muttering in tones just low enough to sting. He could have chosen anyone. But Felix never faltered. His hand was always firm around hers, his presence always unshakable. He introduced her not as a companion, not as a fleeting distraction, but with a pride that melted even the iciest hearts. "This," he would say, his voice strong and steady, "is Samantha, the woman who changed my life." Those words traveled faster than gossip ever could. They carried weight, not the weight of wealth, but the weight of truth. People began to see Samantha differently, not as the girl with no status, but as the woman who had given Felix Kingston, the untouchable billionaire, something he had never been able to buy: love without conditions. Still, Samantha battled her fears. At night, lying in his arms, she whispered, "Felix, what if they never accept me?" Her voice trembled, fragile as glass. He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his eyes soft but unyielding. "Then let them keep their opinions, Samantha, because I didn't choose them. I chose you, and I would choose you in every lifetime." Her heart swelled at his words, and tears slipped quietly down her cheeks. For the first time, she no longer felt like an intruder in someone else's world. She belonged, in his arms, in his life, in his future. And slowly, the world began to notice. Not because of announcements or media stories, but because love has a way of speaking for itself. In the quiet glances they shared, in the way Felix looked at her as if she were the rarest treasure, in the way Samantha smiled at him like he was just a man, not a billionaire, not a legend, just the man she loved. The lesson became impossible to ignore. Those who judged them at first began to see what was real. Love is not measured by money, status, or beauty. Love is measured by choice, by the courage to stand with someone even when society whispers you shouldn't. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon and painted the sky in gold and crimson, Samantha turned to Felix. Her hand slipped into his, her eyes shining with a quiet strength she had never felt before. She whispered softly, the words that had begun their story, but this time with truth flowing through them. "I'm with you." And Felix, pulling her close, smiled with a tenderness that silenced every doubt. This time it wasn't pretend. This time it was forever.